Welcome to the Within the Cauldron Glow podcast or YouTube series. Tonight we are going to be focusing on coven leadership and kind of just being in a coven and how that has impacted our lives, our decision making, and just general advice, lesson learned that we'd like to share with you. I will say, for those of you who are not familiar with Within the Cauldron, we did start as a Facebook group providing semi-monthly online discussions that were free to the public. Our whole view on it was that we wanted an online-based community where people could reach out for knowledge and get advice from their fellow witches and pagans so that they could progress in their path without having to worry about any form of payment. We will be having, for those of you who are interested, feel free to check out Within the Cauldron on Facebook. We do have a discussion that is free to the public that we host via our Steam account later this month. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the discussion tonight regarding coven leadership and just coven life and how it's affected our opinions. All right. So we also have Nico and Chrissy with us. All right. Let's go ahead and jump in and dive in. So I think the first question that is on a lot of people's mind, when did you know or when did you decide that you were ready for pagan leadership? Or when did you get pushed into pagan leadership, as a lot of us like to joke? So Nico, I will start with you.
I want to say, for me, it was probably around the start of the pandemic. So, around 2020, 2019, I had come out of a pagan group and wasn't happy with what was in my area. So I decided, you know what? I've been practicing for almost for a decade at that point, and it's like a little over a decade. And it's like, okay, I'm not happy with what's in my area, so let's do it. So I got with my cousin Chrissy here, and I was like, "Hey, you have a coven. What do I need to start? Like, I don't like what's in the area," and she helped me through like bylaws and got all that stuff, and then I started with friends and family and started putting out invitations, and I was like, "Hey, I'm trying to start this. Who do you know that where's our witchy people at? Where's the witchy family?" And just started putting out by word of mouth. I put up a couple flyers at a couple metaphysical shops, let them know that, hey, I'm looking to start one of these. If you know anybody that is interested, let me know. And I mean, that's kind of where I started. What about you, Chrissy?
Okay. Well, we didn't really wanted to start one. Okay. It just happened. I was at work one day and one of my coworkers asked me if I was a Wiccan. And I said, I'm a witch. And she goes, well, my daughter and I would like to study. And it's like, oh, well, I don't really teach. And she goes, oh, well, we've been looking for teachers for a few years. So I said, just come on over and talk to my husband and I. And she did. And they knew a lot. So we said, yeah, we can get together, do Sabbaths and stuff. And so we started teaching them. And then they had friends. Their friends had friends. Our friends decided, hey, we want to learn too. Two of our friends was already in the path, so they came and joined us. Before we knew, we had like 16 of us hanging out. And somebody says, hey, this is a coven. And we're like, yeah, I guess it is. And they said, well, we should name the coven. I said, okay, fine. So we try different names and we meditate on the name. And it's like the goddess whispered to my ears and said, Coven, the Blessed Lady. And so, because we was blessed by the friends and they made us a spiritual family. And that's how it started. We didn't advertise or anything. It was just word of mouth. That's a different experience than Nico's.
Yeah. Mine's a little bit different than both of yours. So for those of you who do not know, we are family members. So Nico is my mother's cousin, therefore he is also my cousin, and Chrissy is my mother. So I was raised within our coven. She started when I was very, very little, and I kind of just didn't know any other way. So becoming into that pagan leadership, I mean, it was just a natural progression. I found myself, over the time, I would share knowledge, or when it came time to kind of like, I don't want to say quiz, but like ask the students questions, I was sitting there like, like, hey, I know the answer, or this is what it is. Or, like you saw a new coven, like dedicant or something, kind of struggling with like the quarters. And it's like, hey, say this. And, like you would just start kind of feeding answers. And then eventually you realize you're starting to teach in little tiny bits here and there. And then when I got to the point where it was time, like where I was ready for become a priestess, it was kind of that moment where you're like, I know all this knowledge. I've done the rites. I've been there and I've bear witness to them. I should also be sharing my knowledge with people and taking upon some of that duty and lessening the burden for my parents, which not that it's a burden, but it can be straining in a pagan leadership role, and especially within a coven and a priesthood role. So it just kind of flowed into that. It wasn't I don't know if there was a decision, but I do know, at least when it came to going from a priestess to a high priestess, and depending on your degree system, this may be different for you. But I always have this story. Well, not always, but this story is kind of, I'd like to share with you guys on what got me to that point. I remember it was when I lived in Colorado and I was sitting outside with my father. And at that point, I was a priestess, but I wasn't a high priestess yet in my family's coven. And I had passed up on some opportunities. We kind of mixed requirements, which depending on your tradition, you may have different requirements on how to progress from second to third or priestess to high priestess. And he was like, Amber, you've more than done the work for this. And I was sitting there with him, and the wind kind of picked up, and it got to the moment, and we were talking about spirituality too, and just the way that the god and the goddess makes us feel, and our beliefs in them and our feelings. And for me, the major thing where I knew I was like really, really ready was when you could talk about the Lord and the Lady and the emotion, the connection, if you can feel that connection so deeply that it brings tears to your eyes, you're ready to progress. And that's what it was for me. That was when I knew that I was not only ready for a pagan leadership role, but the goddess was ready for me to take that role as well. Yeah. So yeah, you can see all of our stories are a little bit different. So with that, I kind of want to tell into, do you feel that there is some who step into a pagan or coven leadership role when they aren't knowledgeable enough? And I'm not talking about necessarily, because we all have self-doubts. I'm sure Nico, Chrissy, I've definitely all had those moments where you're like, do I know enough? Am I knowledgeable enough? Have I done my research? Is there more that I can do? And I will say, just kind of tailoring it off before I hand it over to you, Nico, we all know this is an everlasting journey path. You are constantly taking the next turn, constantly moving forward with your knowledge and gaining more information. And sometimes it can seem like you're always the student and you may forever be a student. We probably always will be students. I've met some very knowledgeable witches out there who they're still learning to this day, and they've been at it since like the 80s, the 70s. They just keep progressing in their path because there's so much to learn.
There's always something new.
Mhm.
There's always new rituals, new information, studying new traditions. Like, there's always forward progress. And when you stop learning, I think, is when you start having problems. Or when you stop learning is when you start having problems.
Mhm.
Um,
So what are your thoughts? Do you feel, have you encountered
I've encountered what I would
people that aren't
consider
quite knowledgeable enough to step into those roles?
I've encountered what I would consider bad high priest or priestesses. Um, and I don't know if it was lack of training, bad personality, or like they weren't good teachers.
Yeah.
Probably a combination of that. Um, but I was in a previous, or vetting a previous coven, and it didn't work out. And I was really upset with, like, I should start over. There was a Norse pagan group, and they were Norse Wiccans, which wasn't immediately prevalent. That's not what they were advertising. And then I started vetting them, and it's like, okay, it's a mixed group. There's some Wiccans. There's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't what I was looking for at the time. And then, like, we started getting to like arguments where they were misinterpreting things and like making up history and like just teaching bad information, and then I was correcting them, and then I was the bad guy, and I was trying to come into it with like an open mind, and then I'm over here like correcting their high priestess on information that I feel like they should know, and then they started to get like really culty. So I stepped back. They wanted people to like pledge um, like as much money as you can afford to like go towards a plot of land. They wanted to have a commune. They wanted like it started getting really culty. And there's nothing wrong with like if you have a coven piece of land and like people come and do work there. That I think that's beautiful. I would love that. But how they were going about it was just really weird. And I've also we had a lady in my first group that really felt that she was ready to be a high priestess. And she didn't have the emotional stability and maturity that they felt she needed. And she unfortunately proved them right. And she had a mental health crisis and then pretty much made a wedge between the high priest and his wife and was like, well, you know, he likes me and he's like, I'm married. This is my wife. And you're not going to like try to make a problem in my relationship because I'm not giving you what you want in the coven. And you hadn't earned it. But what are your thoughts, Chrissy?
Okay, well, my thoughts is I don't think it's just all the knowledge because when we started out, yeah, we had the knowledge, we had enough knowledge. We even have a few members that have the same knowledge as we did, or even more, on different paths as well. What I think on stepping into coven leadership and when you become a priestess, because I kind of just got nominated, I guess. Maybe it was because our home was the Covenstead. Everybody came over there.
No, it was because we was initiated.
And everybody
else was.
Your dad is talking in my ear. Okay. But
for those of you who don't know, the The gentleman in the background talking was the high priestess. Is a high priestess within my family's coven.
Her dad.
The bird on her shoulder.
The high priest.
Yeah. Yeah, and he talks in my ear. He won't join me, but he talks in my ear all the time. So I'm sorry. Okay, staying focused. So I think it's a passion. It's the leadership should be someone that's very passionate about the craft, very willing to put themselves out there to come up with the lessons, research, networking, research events, come up with the full moons and the Sabbaths and everything. Somebody who kind of takes in charge of it, but not do it as a controlling, but as equal. Like, hey, how about if we do it this day and that day? Try to accommodate, but everybody has a voice. So to me, I think it's just the passion. Whoever's the most passionate and can get things done, that could be a good leadership right there.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely encountered people who it's like they want to move up the ranks. Like they see it as like a trophy. Like I need to be initiated. I'm smart. I feel like I'm smart. I need to move to the next degree. My coven has a degree system in it. And so they just want to keep going. They keep wanting that trophy, that ribbon. And we don't pass out any of those, but they want that cord. They want to keep moving forward. They want to let other people know that they're accomplished in some way. And sometimes those people lack other skills that are necessary to be a leader. I mean, my strong suits are a lot of planning and gathering the information, conducting the classes to teach everybody. I have some of those kind of natural teacher traits, I would say. I like progressing others on their path. I like having those conversations. I like digging deeper. I want to see, I'm one of those people that want to see us all cross the finish line. I don't care if you go in front of me. I just want us all to get there. But there's some people who, it's more about them. And sometimes when you're a little bit more self-centered, for kind of a lack of another way to say it, you care about you in the coven and you don't care about your coven mates. And the major thing when you are a coven leader, which at a certain point you do have to assume authority, especially in a priesthood type role, but you have to think about everybody and how the energy flows. It's not just how much energy you can raise. It's how can your energy flow into the next person, and that next person, how can we all join hands? And how can we, like that saying,
you need a good conductor.
Yeah, you need a good conductor, but you also need to, what's it? I'm totally drawing a blank. How do you enter the circle? From the craft, that saying.
Perfect
with
love
perfect love and
perfect
perfect trust. And that is I will say this now, that is one of the hardest things to try to keep consistent in a ritual with all your coven mates. Sometimes it flows naturally, but I mean this kind of flows into our next thing that we wanted to talk about with like, how do you handle drama in a coven dynamic? Because how can you maintain that? How can you get it where everyone can work peacefully together? And I mean, because you are working with people that are of all different political beliefs, all different socioeconomic statuses. Some people can contribute, some people can't. Some people are shy. Some people are very outspoken. Some people are natural born teachers, even if they're not in a priesthood role. Some people are, lack of better words, like book witches, where they're so knowledgeable and
armchair witches. Yes,
and they don't want to tell anybody their knowledge. They're just comfortable with knowing that, but they don't want to act on it. They don't want to do the motions in the ritual. They don't want to, and there's so much going on, and that can cause drama a lot. Nico, okay, so you are in a leadership role. How have you experienced drama how do you handle it in that coven dynamic?
So to start with, I guess I should explain how my coven dynamic works with. So we have what's a council. So we have there's 3 of us on the council right now. I have 14 coven members. And if there's a coven issue that can't be solved with, like, me or the high priestess will mediate with the 2 parties if necessary, or between the one party. If it's something that needs reprimanded, we go to the council, and then we have an unbiased, like, okay, here's like what you need, like what's going on, what do we do about it? And then we run it through each other, and we try to be as unbiased as possible. I prefer, well, it's easier for me to deal with it when it's not an issue somebody has with me, which is why there's 3 of us. So that if I'm too biased, I'm going to let the other 2 weigh on it.
Okay.
That way that I'm not like, we have personal beef and we're not going to fight over it. But luckily in my current coven, I haven't had any issues so far that have been traumatic. In previous covens, absolutely. We've had infighting. I've been in a couple failed covens where relationship issues have led to, somebody's cheating on somebody and the coven falls apart because, like, the high priest is cheating on their partner with somebody else in the coven, or the kindred I was in, one of the girls had a mental health crisis and then threatened to erect a kneading pole, which, for those of you that don't know, is a unaliving curse. Like, it's like one of the worst curses in Norse paganism you can do on somebody. It's to poison the land and the people on it.
Ah.
And so she stated that she was going to erect this kneading pole against the coven leader. And our bylaws state that you cannot perform baneful witchcraft on any of the members of the coven. Like, that's an immediate out. And so she essentially threatened physical violence and spiritual violence upon the coven or kindred. So they excommunicated her, which was appropriate behavior. And, they sat down and decided, like, okay, do we reprimand her? Like, do we tell her, you need to seek therapy and go through this, and then we'll readdress it? And that's kind of where they started. And they're like, for now, we're just gonna, like, you're not allowed to come to things. Come to things, we're calling the cops. Like, don't make us get her restraining order. Luckily, she went and saw treatment. They still maintained excommunication with her after that, just because we had proven that she wasn't stable enough to be in the role that she wanted to be in. So unfortunately for her, she never got to come back. But I've been pretty lucky so far. Like, in my current system, I haven't had to deal with a whole lot. How about you, Chrissy?
Well, we've been in coven for over 30 years. We had some good and bad. We do have some laws. Pretty much we did the same thing you did, Nick. I think what's really the hardest part is separating yourself from high priestess to a friend. That's the hardest part. Sometimes even co-workers, because I even had a co-worker that was, I worked with and I was friends with, and there was in the coven. So it's very hard to separate everything. I think with the dynamics, I mean, we bring up Lady Shiva's laws. There's 161 of them. Of course, we don't do all 161. We discuss it when we first started, we discuss it with the members of the coven of what should be in place. And we all decided as a coven. It wasn't just the priest and the priestess. we also decided who should be on the council and stuff. So we had 3 of them. Because bias. You gotta kind of be neutral. Sometimes the 3 council members be like, let me take care of it. You just go away. Which they have told me, stay out of it. So, which is fine. You have to love them. You have to love everybody in your coven. I think one incident was when one of the members needed therapy. I went with this person to therapy, and the only reason why I went because the therapist requested it. And when this person told me that they killed the cat because my husband and I would not advance him to a degree that he wasn't ready for, so they killed the cat, which was very okay. And then he wanted me to swear that I would not tell nobody in the coven. And it was like, wait a minute. I cannot do that. This is, this has to come out with the council, with the members, with the high priest. I have to take a sabbatical, for a little bit and just withdraw myself. And of course, I got banished, and made my life a living hell. Try to after that, but it all turned out to be okay. But yeah, you have to set those dynamics, and you have to have at least some kind of councilman or women or both to kind of come between yourself and the coven. So the balance.
Yeah. I mean, those situations are they're unpredictable. They're extremely hard. And sometimes you have to determine, the safety of others as well. And just what can you allow to continue? What can you, is the coven a good fit for them? And not just that, but the responsibility and expectations, that energy that you're welcoming into that circle, and exposing other people's too, because that's a lot of chaotic energy that you're talking about, a lot of intense things, and that's a lot of that's not okay.
Those are the experiences that caused me to, in my bylaws, I request that people give us relevant medical information. So if you're in mental health treatment, do you have any mental health or like mood disorders that we need to know about so that we can help support you?
Yeah.
And so we can be on the lookout, because I've had members that are of mental health issues. We had a schizophrenic man at one point, and we had to help him be on the lookout for if he was developing a psychotic episode, because it can be very hard to differentiate between like the energy and magic and a psychotic episode. So we had to help like check in with him and see like where things were and make sure that he was in a stable space. And then the previous group, we had a woman who she ended up being bipolar. She was undiagnosed at the time, but and it's not saying that I would exclude somebody for having mental health issues, but we like to be informed, so so we can help you as best as possible. And for any other medical conditions that we need to be aware of, if you're diabetic, do you have a heart condition? So if you drop over, we know what to do. Like I need your emergency contact. So part of I have a binder. It's got everybody in the coven, emergency contacts, relevant health information. Are you epileptic? Do you have seizures? Do you have a heart condition? Are you on medication? And like, I don't need that updated super frequently, but just so that I have an idea that if something happens, I know who to get a hold of, what to expect's going on. Just because personally, I have complicated health. Like my coven's fully aware that I have like life-threatening food allergies. And if I'm and I'm diabetic, so if I'm unconscious on the ground, this is what I need you to do. Like if I just drop over, like
Right.
this is what I want to happen. And but I do that with anybody that I'm going to be around in an extended period of time. Like, hey, I have medical problems. If this happens, this is what needs to happen. Like, there's a card in my wallet. Like, everybody knows that. This is where my pens are. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
helps so much that, um, and it's part of my vetting process, really, where like,
Mhm.
you want to be in the coven. Okay, here's like pretty much like a paper I want you to fill out. Tell me about yourself, your experiences, and like relevant information as part of my vetting process so that, you know, if I don't know you personally, now I get to know you and then we go through like an interview period. But
Yeah.
that's how I do things. And
So,
it really helps.
I mean, I could definitely see that helping a lot, especially like just preparing yourself for any energy in any situations. What do you think about conflicting personalities? Well, kind of putting it that way, where two coven members clearly don't jive.
Mhm.
And
That
I
was
mean,
my first
like
coven.
recently we've done with a lot of political beliefs where one is one side, one is another, and how does that peacefully exist within a coven? And then also just, people and their views on things and how, some people are more soft spoken, a little bit softer of a person, we'll say. And then, there's another person that's a little bit more abrasive, a little bit more hard, a little bit less maybe caring in certain ways or openly caring about things. How do you What
I
are your
have
thoughts on
to,
those type of situations?
I try to play on people's strengths and
Mhm,
try to push them on their weaknesses to like,
mhm,
if it's something that we can build on and I can help you with,
mhm,
absolutely. But obviously, if you have social anxiety, I'm not going to go make you speak in front of the entire coven if
mhm,
you're not comfortable doing so. Um, so I try to play with people's strengths. Like if I have
mhm.
somebody that's a talker, if you want to lead like the lengthy part of the rituals, like here's the script, like go ham. If you
Make them read
and
the charges.
oh yeah, like things like that where it's like I'll play to people's strength.
Mhm,
My first group, I had a woman who she had a very abrasive personality. An absolutely lovely woman, one of the most kind and loving women I've ever met, but she came off a little abrasive. She was very, very aggressive with her opinions and her words, and we had to like pull her off on the side a couple times and be like, "Hey, you're at a 10. Can we bring it to like a 7?"
Yeah.
right, right.
And like or like help her regulate and be like, hey, you're really
Mm,
charged up right now, like let's do some breathing and grounding and like we'll get back to it. So like just taking that
mm,
grace in that moment, being like, hey, we're aware of this
mm.
and we need to like come back down a little bit before we keep going. And it's
Yeah.
okay if you have to stop a ritual and like address something, like the gods understand, like the people in there
Mhm.
understand. And like we were all friends and it was just one of those like, okay, you are screaming at the top of your lungs the charge of the fire element. And I love this passion, but like,
Sometimes you just feel it.
yeah, but we're indoors, 5 feet away from each other, ma'am.
Don't have to yell.
We can hear you.
Right.
This is an apartment. The neighbors don't need to hear you.
Right,
Yeah.
you're just like, "I can feel the heat, now simmer down, please."
Yeah.
And as far as like disagreements go, I
Mm,
don't allow politics in my circle at all.
I
You're
agree.
allowed to have
Agree
whatever
exactly.
views you want. Um, Now, I do have anti-bigotry clauses,
Mm,
anti-racism clauses. There's no discrimination whatsoever, no sexual
mhm.
harassment. I have a zero tolerance policy.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
don't even get a warning. You act out like that, you're gone. Like no
Yeah.
questions asked, no forgiveness, none of that.
Mhm,
Um, I've have as far as I'm aware, our coven's mixed politically.
mhm,
Not that we discuss politics like within circle or
mhm,
anything, but just knowing them outside of circle, there's some
mhm,
mixture. Um, but being like a witchy space, most people have similar views. Like that, there is of course going to be some differences. There are
Mhm.
witches on the right, the left, and center.
Mhm.
But my coven mostly aligns for the most part, so it's never
Mhm.
been too much of an issue. We're generally all.
Mhm.
I've picked my coven members who are like-minded individuals.
Mhm. Who drive pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't. I've had some limited experience with it, and it's really just preaching that acceptance and the catching it,
Mhm.
because if you aren't trying, and this is just my advice, if you aren't trying to be very hard one way or the other,
Mhm.
like if you are okay with that, like there being a middle ground between everybody, then you do have to stop it as soon as the conversation happens. You need to catch it
Mhm.
every time, because if you let it go too much, even if it aligns with your personal beliefs and you're interested in the conversation, but you're in a coven space in a way, or in a class or a gathering, even I'm not typically, conversations don't come out during ritual, but in a class or a gathering, you have to stop it and then restate, like, hey, I get it, we want to have this conversation, or you want to have these conversations with people, let's do it outside of this zone.
Mhm.
Because
I
it's
have to
it's
ring.
once you let it go, then you're starting to pick and you're starting to choose, and next thing you know, you're hurting somebody's feelings, and you just kind of have to think about it
Mhm.
on
Yeah,
I
as
have
a
to
in a
stop my
neutral
husband.
party.
you do.
It's one of my husband's favorite things to talk about, and
Mm-hmm.
with him being in my coven, I I have a bell that it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we like this is your please stop talking about this bell,
Mm-hmm.
and but I know it's a thing. Our whole coven knows it's a thing. Like you get him on certain topics, he will not stop. He
Yeah.
like, and it's not a problem,
Mm-hmm.
but it can be disruptive depending on what's going on.
All right, and it can
Because you get
switch the
distracted with,
energy,
yeah,
funnel it in a
and it's
different
like we
way
can
that's
talk about
not
that
necessarily
after.
always productive
Yeah.
for what your intention for that meeting is supposed to be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a part of knowing like who's in your coven, like,
Mm-hmm.
and like learning people's personalities and like what their triggers are and things like that. Super important when you're working in any group setting,
Yeah,
so that you
absolutely.
can better help people around you. And that's really what being in a coven leadership role is we're here to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a role of servitude. Like I'm here to help you grow. I'm here to help give you knowledge. If I don't have an
Mm-hmm.
answer, I will find somebody that does.
Right, right. Now, kind of leading off of what we were talking about, a little bit with having them, just being aware of their personalities. How
Mhm.
do you, excuse me, how do you vet coven members, and not necessarily just fully personalities, just how do you decide that they're right for the coven?
Ooh. So for me, I like bringing in. So my coven's mostly made up of my extended family and friends.
Okay.
So I typically wouldn't invite somebody into my coven that I haven't hung around with for about 6 months. So I typically know within 6 months of hanging out with somebody, like, okay, if you're a witchy person and I know you,
Mhm.
and like, do our traditions kind of vibe? Like, are you interested in joining a coven and like hang out? So we used to do witchy tea times. So we would go down to a coffee shop
Mhm.
and we would go hang out and do like a public little thing where it's like, hey, we're witches, we're gonna go hang out. Or during COVID, we used to do Discord calls.
Mhm.
Oh, I apologize. The cat's hitting all
No
buttons.
worries. The cat knows you're
Uh,
talking.
and just to meet people and
Mhm.
talk, and got to a point where it's like, hey, you're really cool. Like you've met other members of the coven. Like we'd take the whole or as many coven members as we could to these. Like bounce ideas off of people. Like we'd pick a book or something, do book clubs, things like that.
Right.
And just the community outreach stuff where it's like, hey, we're looking for witchy people, and whether or not you want to join the coven, like we're looking for witchy friends.
Right.
So, um, but I don't offer it willy nilly where it's not like, hey, you're a cool person. join my cult with a lowercase c.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of thought and vetting into it because obviously this is somebody that you're going to have to invest a lot of time and energy into,
Mhm.
depending on where their knowledge and skill levels are. And like, is this something that's mutually beneficial? Like, do you? Because we have an outer circle too, so I have like friends that are witchy that aren't in my coven, but
Mhm.
we'll do witchy stuff together every now and then. Where it's like, hey, we're doing a collective working. Like, do you want in on it, or like vice versa?
Mhm.
And I absolutely love it, but they don't have an interest in joining the coven. But if there's a collective work going on, I have a list of people that, hey, we're doing a collective healing spell, or, things are really weird right now. We're doing some protection work. Do you want on the list? Like things like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Chrissy? How do you vet coven members, potential coven members?
Before when anybody wants to come and join us, they're welcome, but they need to kind of like do an essay, just a page of
Mhm.
what, why, what they're looking for, what they want to join, or what they want to worship or anything,
Mhm.
how passionate they are. Um, and that kind of reads out some. Because if you have some that says, oh, I want to put a spell on somebody, I want to know how to do it. If your spell work is really important the first time you come to the coven, no, it's not going to happen. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, you're not going to be part of the coven if you just want spells off the bat.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just something that you will learn, but not just off the bat. Networking is really important. I love to network with other groups. I
Mhm.
like to find, like Nick said, people to hang out with the coven.
Mhm.
So I like to take coven members to different events and say, hey, we're a coven. You know, we can help out, whatever you want us to do. We're here to make friends. That's the best part of
Mhm.
of networking, is making friends.
And
And
I'll put a little side note in there. These were events that she was also part of the leadership for a good. We
yeah,
didn't just show up to an event and say, "Put us to work."
well, the first 2 years, we was not part of it. Well, let me take that back. The first year we wasn't. The second year we end up doing one because of this, like, hey, we like your energy. We like your coven energy. What you do a traditional ritual, which we are Sturgaria. So to join the coven, at first you have to wanted that tradition.
Mhm.
Some members do start out as that, and then pretty soon they go their own way, which is fine. It's okay.
Mhm.
Free as you come, free as you go. Just
Absolutely.
be friends. That's it.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to vetting coven members, my major thing is that I want, and I know this does not fit everyone's cup of tea. So a lot of and I'll kind of back up a little. A lot of the dynamic in my family's coven is the priesthood would find people, or people would be drawn to them, and then they decide, okay, do I want to take you on as a student? And then from there, it becomes, after they've done their initial vetting, then they present them to the coven as a whole on, do you want to become more than just my student? Do you want to become a member of my coven? So it's
Mm,
kind of like a tier in a way where you get kind of drawn more towards the core.
Mhm.
And then for me, what I personally look for is I like when people want to do the work. And I don't, there's nothing against, and I don't want to call people lazy. I don't want to be judgmental in that way. But there is some lazy witches when it comes to coven work. They want to attend, they want to be present, and some people are completely, that's their cup of tea. They don't want to they don't want to read books. They don't want to study. They don't want to dig in deep by any means. They just want to be present and feel the energy.
we have the same thing.
And
I have
I,
the outer circle, which is people that
Mhm.
want to come to, they want somebody to celebrate the Sabbats with, and they want to come do spell
Mhm.
work, but
And I get that
they,
community is great.
yeah, they
I
don't
love
want to
community.
come. for classes. They don't
Mm-hmm.
like they're either on their own path and like we come together and do stuff, but absolutely. And then I have students too where like I teach outside of my coven and within my coven.
Yeah.
So I've done local folk magic classes and healing classes, things like that outside of coven work. Um, our Facebook page within the cauldron, we do discussions and classes
Mhm.
on a monthly basis where there's always something to learn, and we try to get as many different people in there as possible because
Yeah.
there's always something new from somebody's tradition or somebody does something differently, and it's like, wow, that's a really cool way to do that, or I never thought about doing that, which is why I absolutely love it.
Right.
And then I do locally, I do public events too, where we have a non-tradition circle that
Mhm.
they do. They host one of our metaphysical shops here, and it's plenty of covens come. We're not there to necessarily recruit. We do like a big pagan holiday, good
Mhm.
food, good stuff like that. And I'm on the setup and teardown crew with my coven.
Mhm.
So we're contributing to like the local community as well. And I'm not there looking for new members necessarily, but we're there to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so there you kind of have the outer ring in a way,
Mhm.
and the students that come that are formal and informal, however. But I'm definitely drawn to the people that want to do the work, that are thirsty for the knowledge, that you can just
I agree.
tell they want
Passion.
it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm also turned off from the people who want the knowledge, but they don't want to.
It takes a
They
lot of
don't want
work.
to go through
And
any type of time frame. They just
yeah,
want to prove themselves.
Mhm.
But then you're like, but did you? I'm a big person when it comes to like progression in the path, where it's like you need to. There's the knowledge, but then there's the spiritual side, and I'm heavy on both of them. And
mm,
if I don't, as a teacher for a student, if I don't see you progressing in the spiritual side, I will not progress you. And that's just me. And I will be honest about it, because I feel like there's a certain level of spirituality that you need for every benchmark in my path.
yeah, like you
Yeah.
need. I need to see you deepening your experiences
Mm-hmm.
within the tradition and within yourself. And if you're not growing as a person and growing as a
Mm-hmm.
witch, and you're just looking like power grab for more power,
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably not going to take you very far because I'm not interested in cultivating people that are hungry for power.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not like I'm saying like I should withhold that ability to gain more power. No, I mean, I get that, but it's there's a combination, and if it's kind of like the pieces fit in a certain way to keep
Yeah.
unlocking more tiers, and if you can't figure that out, I'm not going to progress you. And I can't tell you when you're there. Like I can tell you when I feel that you are there, and when I feel comfortable progressing you as like your teacher, as your mentor, as your high
Mm.
priestess.
Mhm.
But you have to do that. I can't make you be there.
Oh yeah. When I make them ask me when they're going to move
Mhm.
up
Yeah.
and be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, because we have
Mhm.
outlines of like, okay, here's our curriculum. Like,
Mhm.
I need you to be competent in this
Mhm.
many forms of divination and like, show me that you can do
So
these variety of spells and
before
things
you
like
begin on that, I think this is the perfect time to pivot into our thoughts on degree systems and progressing in the path. So I'll let you take the lead since you already started on that.
Amber, your dad wants to say something for a
This
minute.
topic that we're talking
The
about.
topic that we're on right now.
Mhm.
About vetting and moving people, vetting
Yeah.
people. Go ahead.
He's coming in.
So this is
Hey guys,
Here.
what I have to say about this whole thing is, as a leader,
mhm.
as a high priest or priestess, when these people come in, it's up to the teacher to teach them about spirituality,
Mm.
letting them feel that magic, That's what's important, is that people not only gain knowledge, but it's up to us to teach them about the magic, to let them feel it. But that's all I have to say.
Oh yeah, no, and I agree that because just to add on to that, kind of we were talking about, I can't get you there. I can't make your puzzle fit just right. I can provide you pieces. I can generally tell you how it's supposed to go, but I can't, I can't just force the pieces together. Like I feel like we can all probably agree on this, that we provide you that opportunity to feel the magic, and we start the flow, but I can't get you to open your third eye. I can't get you to open yourself to feel it. I can generally guide you there. I can tell you maybe what you should be feeling, some techniques that might help you open yourself up, but I can't make you receive that energy. I can't make you feel that magic. I can try my best, but if I'm forcing it on you, you're not a good fit.
No, everybody
There's
feels
more work that
things.
you need to do first.
Yeah, and it comes from an understanding that everybody experiences magic and energy differently. Everybody's going to feel things differently. And we have all of the different clairs, and some people have ones that are stronger for them than others.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it really throws a curveball sometimes, where it's like, oh, like my experience and how I feel energy and magic may be totally different for somebody else, where it's like, I know a lady who has a clairgustance, which is she tastes and smells energy. And I'm trying to explain this is the kind of energy feeling behind this, as somebody who does tactile and visual. And she's going, "Oh, it tastes like lemons." And I'm like, "Okay, so I want you to taste lemons when you do this?" Oh, okay. Good, interesting. But just sitting there okay, that was a huge learning curve for me, is that, my personal experience with how I feel magic isn't universal. And sometimes people don't feel energy moving at all. They're there, they're doing the motions, they're raising energy, but they're unaware of it. They don't feel it running through the circle. They'll visualize it, but they don't feel it. And it blew my mind.
Right.
But that's a thing. Some people don't. And it's not you're a bad witch or anything, but different people feel things and experience things differently.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I guess before we get back to the kind of just degree structure in a way, for me, I like the heavier feeling when it comes to that is what makes me feel like, yes, you achieved this. And if I don't get to that point, then it feels very I don't want to say I'm disappointed in other experiences, but that, when I experience magic, I experience in a heavy, almost cloaking way.
Yeah.
And if I don't get that build up, and that may be, growing up in a more established coven, I feel like everyone's energy, for the most part, especially in the inner circles, got to that point that the buildup was that much. So when I'm not there, it's kind of, I almost feel lost. But that's also, growing up in a well-established coven and experiencing that throughout decades, and then turning around and doing more maybe a public rite, where we're all just kind of a mixed bag of nuts.
Yeah,
you have that moment where you're like, yeah, there was energy, but it was different.
Well, people have more walls up in public rites, where in a close coven circuit, we all trust each other, we all know each other. We're fine with our energies blending together. And when you're doing a public rite with strangers, everybody's got a little bit of a wall up. And so, while you're still raising energy, it's not as synergistic. If that
and it's
makes
also
sense.
kind of when you try to plug in something to an outlet with the light on, works great most of the time. If you try to plug something in the dark, like your phone charger or whatever, you're just like, it's on the wall. half of it goes in. You're like, how did that happen? Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you have to back up and be like, whoa, we're just going to have to re-examine this, maybe turn on a light, figure out how to do this real quick.
Exactly.
That's been a learning curve with our public rights too. Is like,
Right.
okay, trying to like get everybody to raise this energy, and we have a few practitioners who've been like doing this for a long time, and like they're like forcibly circulating the energy around the circle because it's like skipping people, and it's like,
Well,
okay,
and then,
we can do
sometimes
it.
you get that person that's like, just going at it, and you're like, okay, yeah, do you? And, then you got that person that's just, eyes closed, humming that energy kind of out there and like
Laid
little
back.
light
I've
waves,
seen
and
it
you're
both.
just like, okay,
It's
and
so fun to
sometimes it
watch,
goes
though.
together, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes certain people's reactions or how they push their energy out closes down others people. They're like, I don't want that. And other people are like, oh yeah, give it to me. It's different. Okay, so backing back up. This degree structure, because we get on tangents. Okay, Nico, how do you approach the degree structure? Do you have it in your tradition, your path, your coven, or do you do it a little differently? And do you have a set criteria?
Okay, so I do have a degree
That's a loaded
system.
question.
So I started a sister coven based off of Chrissy's coven.
Mhm.
So we have a very similar degree system. I borrowed a lot of that from hers. I'm a little more lenient with mine. So my initiation into the coven, first level. So you coming into the coven, I bring you in at level 1, and then for me, it's typically about a year to 1 to 3 years. So depending on like what prior experience you have, like you need to show me where you're at, whether that's through your oral knowledge, show me your grimoire. I need to be able to track where you're at so that I can help you go further. But I like people, before I bring them in as a priest or priestess, to be confident in at least 2 divination systems. Like I want you to be like, you don't need a book. You can confidently read in 2 divination systems of your choice. Be able to confidently um, have your correspondences down. So crystals or herbs. I prefer both, but like I can be lenient there. I need you to be able to create your own spell. I don't want you to recite a spell out of a book. I need you to be able to create a spell in front of me and tell me what it's for and it makes sense to me. Like, show me your knowledge. Um, and then I need you to do a public rite. So, whether that's within our coven or a public thing, I need you to be comfortable enough creating and designing an entire ritual and then performing that. As well as, showing me that you're competent doing spell work, researching within the tradition, these are the rules, these are this, you're absorbing this information. Or my group's more eclectic. So while I teach Strega, I also encourage people to find what's comfortable with them.
Yeah.
And so I have this blended thing where, well, we work through Strega, and then like we have like a dedicated pantheon for the coven. We all work in other traditions and other pantheons outside of coven work. So we had to decide, okay, what pantheon are we using? Which was part of my bylaws. Like, okay, like these are the gods and goddesses that were like the approved list, and we may change them depending on what's going on. But I had to set all that up. And then, next level. So first is like 1 to 3. Next one is 3 to 5, depending on, where things are at. And then I'll do an accelerated program if I need to. Like if somebody's like, I've been doing this for years, I know all of this. Fantastic. Show me what you got and we'll see where you're supposed to be. And I'm fine doing that. But I typically do about 3. You have I guess 4. So you have your initiation in the coven, priest or priestess or priestex, gender neutral, high priest, priestess, or priestix, and then elder. And then I haven't had anybody get to this point yet past the members that I put on my council. So we have the Council of Elders. So once you reach my 4th degree, if you choose to join our judiciary court, you can. I'd be open to have more members on that just to make things more fair. And then, so once you hit High Priest or Priestess, you should be confident doing public rites and taking on students at that point. Like, I want to see you teaching people. I want you to show me that you can show other people what they're doing. And like regurgitating the information, as well as that's kind of the point where if you want to branch out and you want to start your own coven, like that's where we start having that conversation.
Okay. So for mine, I mean, it's similar, obviously. I'm a little bit more strict, I guess, than some other people in the priesthood of my personal tradition in the coven. So to begin with, I primarily do Strigaria, Levikia, and I do have there's some eclecticism. I have some Cabot degrees. However, out of respect for sovereignty towards the Cabot tradition, I chose not to move forward because I can't abandon my roots. It's just it's there for me, and I understand the sovereignty of it, so I'm not going to proceed on that. But I still practice it to a certain extent. Now, when it comes to my tradition, I do the kind of vetting stage, I guess you would say. So up to like a pre-dedicant to dedicant. That's typically 6 months. Sometimes it just kind of depends on when like Beltane or Samhain lands and where they are and their knowledge and pre-existing knowledge on that. Because sometimes by the time they get to the point that they want to approach a coven, they have a decent understanding of the craft. And then we do the year and a day or year time frame.
2 years a day.
Initiation, 1 year. And from there, so once we get to initiation, and again, it kind of depends on their knowledge and all that. But I try to be pretty firm, more or less, for it because I don't know what you know until you prove it to me. And we can have a great conversation, but it doesn't mean that you know it necessarily. It just means you've memorized the words. And then from there, from 1 to 2, so first to being a priesthood, you have to demonstrate, kind of like you mentioned, that you have the ability to create a spell. I like a couple spells. I want to know that you get it, and it's not just like a pre-memorized, light a candle, here's a stone, there you go, type of thing. Here's some words. I want a little bit more. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I want some more. I also like usually when you go into like priesthood, when you begin that role, because just because you got to priesthood doesn't mean I'm going to throw you to the wolves and say teach everybody. I want you to be able to do a full moon rite. I want you to understand different lunar rites. I want you to get that. Like you need all of that information. And I also want to understand different forms of divination. You don't have to be extremely proficient, but you need to know how to do it, and not just know how to do it, like how it works, but like get some information. I want to see that progress. I want to see that knowledge, that depth into it. Not that you have to be a master, but you need to know that for me. I also, you need to be doing some of the legwork. Not just some, but you need to be doing the legwork. You need to show, if you want to get out of that initiation stage into the priesthood, you have to show that you are willing to do the work, that you're willing to guide others. You preferably need to show that kind of teaching ability. You need to be able to stand in front of others, to me, and say words of the rite. You need to do all the quarters. You need to know how the ritual functions and be willing to do that in front of others. Not like, there's no way to progress if you have some stage fright or you're not comfortable with public speaking in any way, but that is kind of a requirement if you want to be in the priesthood for me. And we are, I'm part of a community-based coven, so we like to interact with the public, and you kind of just have to know that. And not saying you necessarily need to be fully out of the broom closet necessarily, but you will be seen. And you just kind of have to, if that's not a thing for you, if you're not okay being seen within your belief system, I may not be the right coven for you.
I agree with that to a point. So I have an opt-in and opt-out.
Yeah, no,
So,
I get that.
like, some people, like, for their safety or whatever, they're not fully out of the broom closet, so to speak. And that's in our bylaws. We're like, we will discuss, like, the basics of what happened, but I'm not going to tell you who I did it with, where we did it,
Yes.
and just to keep things calm and, like, protect anonymity where I need to. But for the
Yeah,
most
no, I
part,
get that.
everybody in my group's out of the closet. So, like, they're
I think it's
not.
one of those, like, I'm not going to put you on a poster.
Yeah.
I'm not going to introduce you publicly. Like, this is your name. Go look them up on Facebook or online, or go find their place of work. Like, a certain amount of details will be withheld, but you may be asked to participate in a public rite. And it's okay if you say no and, you give your reasons. But it's just know that these are opportunities that will be presented to you because of the type of leaning that we have. And then, of course, from like second to third, for me, that is heavy on the spirituality side.
Yep.
That progression needs to be there. If you don't develop spiritually, you're not getting there. And there's some other details. You need to do the rites of passage, and just like to name some things. You really need to just be able to do the Sabbats like the back of your hand.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know that. You need to know why the wheel turns. So
I
to
have a good
speak.
question. So, for you, do you have a minimum requirement of how many Sabbats and estimates that a coven member has to attend?
So we have heavy preferences on sound and belting. Typically, those are non-negotiable unless, of course, we understand children and celebrating Halloween and sound. Sometimes we get that. We get family happens. But we try to have those two. And then preferably at least every other. But we would prefer every if we could. I would say ideally 6 out of the 8. But at least half.
I have a minimum requirement of 3. So to maintain like active quote unquote like coven membership, I require you to attend at least 3 in-person events, if possible. Like,
yeah, no, if we're going
there's
to, I'm thinking more, I guess, more of like priesthood expectation.
oh yeah, no, for
When it
priesthood,
comes
like
to just maintaining membership or being like an initiate, like I'm still calling you part of the coven. I would say at least 3, and then preferably, I would say at least a third of the full moons. If you're attending 1 out of 3 rites, and then at least every other class.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, for me personally, I want you there for the rites, but if you're there for the classes, you're participating.
You're learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I have the opt for.
And I'm okay with and this might be kind of what you're hinting at, self doing it.
Yeah. If
Like,
you
here,
can't,
I'm going to provide you an alternative.
yeah,
And
if you
I have
can't
light
make it to a
alternatives.
ritual for whatever, and then I always try to do mine like the adjacent weekend, just because it's so much easier trying to get a group of people together on a weekend. Like, we try to do ours on a Saturday. So whatever the Saturday before or after the Sabbath is or the full moon,
Mhm.
I do like the 3 day period. So the full
Mhm.
moon, the day before and the day after, we try to line something up. And normally
Mhm.
we do our full moon rites solo, or well, I
Mhm.
live with three of my coven members, so
Mhm.
we'll do one here, and then the other members, if we can get together, great. If not, you're expected to do it solo.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I'm very like permission to conduct your path the way that you
Mhm.
feel is right. And sometimes that means doing a full ritual. Sometimes it means finding ways to observe it, not necessarily in a ritual setting.
Oh yeah, I'll be the first person to tell you that
So I'm okay with that.
I've had holidays where I've literally slapped a tea light on my altar
Mm.
with an offering and been like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, things are crazy,
Yeah, no, and
but
I
I'm
don't
doing
feel
it."
like
Like
yeah,
it's
and I
not a
don't
full
always.
ritual, and like it happens, work,
Mm.
life, and everything else. And I don't have kids, but
Mm.
just the mundane life and everything else like creeps up on you sometimes, and
Right? Yeah.
sometimes you can't get people together, or life is absolutely crazy, and or oh god, I looked at the calendar and it's Samhain and I haven't even bought Halloween candy, and what day
Right.
of the week is it? Absolutely happens, and
And
it's it happens to us all.
yeah, and it helps like so like my family's coven, especially with growing up within a coven, and my parents, they had children, they had a lot of us. So we were more family based. So
Yeah.
typically we are very family friendly, and I try to stick with that. With that being said, we do expect children to be well behaved to a certain extent.
Mhm.
We get interruptions are going to happen. We totally understand that. We get that they are going to run in and out of circle at times. And I typically go with the goddess knows. It's
Yeah, I
okay.
do. I have
It's
uh,
okay.
Yeah.
the God's grace for the circle, where if you need to
Yeah.
run and use the bathroom, you need to go check on the kids. You do
Right.
not need to hold the
If I
door.
can open a doorway for you, awesome.
Either
If
we
I
start,
can't,
yeah,
I get it.
yeah. If I try to leave a doorway,
Mm.
and then like I'll leave an extra athame over on like the side for the circle,
Yeah.
and be like, you need to cut yourself open real quick and like go check on something, go check
Right.
the
Yeah.
kids. Like it happens.
Mm.
My current coven,
Mm.
my youngest member is 17.
Mm.
Um, so well, my sister-in-law does have some littler ones. I don't
Mm.
have any like littles running around very often. But when I was in the kindred, we had kids from 4 up to 12 with some of the
Right.
members.
So what do
And
you oh go on and continue. I'm already thinking of
uh,
another question in my mind.
so what we would do is we'd have
Mm.
the right, and then off on the side. So in the the high priestess
Mm.
and priest's house, which is where we would do these, we would have a ritual fire, we would do our stuff, and then off on the side, so we did boffer sword fights for the kids. So
Okay.
we would give them boffer swords and teach them like combat training.
Mm.
So one of the wives or one of the husbands of the kindred members would kind of supervise the kids. So they'd be
Mhm.
over there like running them through little combat drills and like playing Nerf games with them, and like we'd have activities for them
Mhm.
so that they're not bored, but they're not like they're occupied, but they're still supervised.
Mhm.
So like if
I
you
like
have to
that.
bring the kids, like there's things for them to do. Like we had like
Mhm.
holiday coloring pages for the
Mhm.
Sabbats and like kids crafts, and like they were included, but when it came time to do the actual ritual, we kept them a little bit of ways,
Mhm.
but then we brought everybody back for the big feast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's certain rituals, certain rites, especially Samhain typically. for me. But there's certain rites, especially if there's any type of initiation going on. Preferably find a sitter for your kids.
Yep.
Or, if sometimes we have others, whoever, your significant person or partner, maybe sometimes they don't participate. And I'm totally okay with, if you want to bring your partner, that's okay. They're not going to participate in ritual unless that ritual is more open, or they're part of the coven in some type of way. But they can totally hang out in like the living room or another room and hang out with the children during the ritual. Some rituals are lengthy, so it's kind of keep that in mind. But I will say at certain points, children can disrupt the flow of energy. And at some points, as coven leaders, you need to draw a line, and sometimes it's okay. Sometimes you're just like, not tonight. And usually that's always discussed beforehand.
And personally, in my coven network, I won't let anybody join under the age of 16, and I need parental consent. So, my brother-in-law is in my coven. He's been in my coven for 2 years. He asked if he could join, and I went and talked to my father-in-law. I was like, hey, Joan wants to join. Can I teach Joan witchcraft? Can I bring Joan in a circle? If I would like for you to be coming to rituals with us, also because he's a coven member, but it's like, if you can't and Joan wants to go, can I pick Joan up and take Joan with me? And get all of the permission required and be like, I'm not going to teach a minor something without somebody's consent. And
Mom, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Mom, you actually had some experience with this when the coven was first starting out. With just the minor, and then the parents deciding maybe this isn't the fit that they want for their child.
Yeah, when we our first members was I think she was
she 16?
13. I think she was 13. She was 13, and her mom was with her.
In some context, she also there's 4 children. I am the youngest, so at that point there was some older children that were in that same age range as her.
And after about 3 years, her daughter turned 16, and she was still okay with us teaching, but she wanted to go solitary, but her daughter did not. So it was okay because we established that bond between the mother, and she trusted us with her daughter. She knew what was going to happen and everything, what happened in rituals and stuff, and she was okay with it. So yeah, but anybody else, with permission from the parents, we try to do 16 and under. Over 16 and over. Sorry. That was just a one exception with the first member, because she was actually the first 2 members, her mom and her. But yeah, it's always 16 and over. And even with the parents' permission, you always want to ask the parents if they want to come and just oversee it, because some parents would be like, oh, it's okay, I trust her. But then again, it's like some parents I want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Especially
if they're not within the witchiness.
Yes.
They don't know what's going on. They don't know there's so many stereotypes for witches.
Yeah.
I even had this with my own parents, where I was at a public rite and we had a petting zoo come in. And so I'm sending my mom pictures of goats and us petting these goats and feeding these baby goats bottles. And she's like, the goat's not a part of
sacrifice,
right?
right?
Yeah, and I was like, no. I was like, no, we have a petting zoo for the kids.
Yeah.
But she had to ask the question.
Right. Because you don't know when you don't know what you don't know.
When you're not in it, you don't know what's going on. And it was a totally valid question.
There's some paths where that's more okay than others.
Yeah, you have to research what the tradition is and what you're getting into, because now in the Norse paganism, we do blood magic, and I do use animal components in rituals, but those are often more private just
Right.
because some people are squeamish, some people don't like using animal components,
Mhm.
and like I'm respectful of that. Where like for the winter Samhain or for Yule, and the we do a protection ritual which involves using pig's blood. No, I
Mhm.
don't. I generally purchase pig's blood from a butcher. I'm not going to go process a hog, partially because a hog is almost $1,000,
Right.
$500 to $1,000,
Wow.
and so I'm going to do my forgiveness ritual for the life of the animal, and then we'll sanctify it and use it in ritual and go from
Mhm.
there. But I'm not going to make people join in that aren't comfortable doing it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And well, and then just outside of minors, you're working with people from majority, I would say, people that come to the craft are from an Abrahamic
Most people
Judeo-Christian
come from a
belief.
Christian background, and
And
they're
they come in and sometimes it's, "Ooh, what are you gonna do?" And a lot of people, some people expect a little bibbity bobbity boo going on, and it's typically not the case. And people don't know that. And not to say that they aren't those people out there who have, put some bad taste in people's mouths, well deservedly, but you don't know what to expect always.
oh
And
yeah,
you
and
don't know
every
what you're
coven's going to be
comfortable with.
different. Because
Yeah.
like you have covens that do skyclad, which is people perform in the buff, and you
Mm-hmm.
have others that don't, and like there's so many variations,
Mm-hmm.
and these are all questions that you should ask when you're trying. Like if
Yeah.
you're curious about joining a coven, like these are things you should ask in the vetting process. Like, is this a vegan group? Like, do you work with animal components?
Mhm.
Do you do skyclad? Is this an expectation? Like, are there
Oh, yeah, and
exceptions to that? Like,
well, and
these
just
are all
getting to know the
fantastic
people,
things
because
to ask. Yeah.
some people are more, lack of better words, sexually charged.
Hmm.
And not to say that that is always that's an okay thing. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not okay.
Yep.
And it's a lot of things are deeper conversations and determining what is right for you.
Mhm.
But, like you never know what you're gonna get. And some people are more joking and laughing and things are fun and sometimes they're flirty and other times they're more cold and stoic in a certain way and reserved, and you don't know which direction until you have those conversations.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I will say that it's probably a good ending point for tonight, an interesting ending point. There's so much more that we can dive into, and I know we will in the future. Kind of a part 2, 3. I mean, we could just go on and on about coven leadership
Oh yeah.
experiences and tips and
Oh,
tricks of the trade, and even just advice for newcomers. And I know we'll touch base on that in the near future. Um, just a reminder for those, we started with that within the Cauldron Facebook group. Feel free to check it out. We host ideally monthly, if not semi-monthly, discussions open free to the public that we um, start kind of with the Facebook page, but we host via our Steam server, and then we just kind of go forward. So, or Discord server. Sorry, not Steam. I'm thinking online gaming now.
Yeah,
um,
Discord.
yeah,
And that's right down below us. So if you look up Within the Cauldron on Facebook, you'll find our group.
Mhm.
And then we post our events, uh,
the podcast, the
sessions,
discussions.
podcasts.
Mhm.
You can find us there if you want to learn more about us, our traditions, different things. We frequently post in the groups daily questions.
Mhm.
We have resources in there, and then we have a link for our Discord within our Facebook group.
Mhm.
Uh,
Also, it's a great way to find community, like-minded individuals. We're just kind of open with building your knowledge, building your craft, and making connections.
mhm.
And we try our very best, and so far we haven't had to charge for anything. So we just want to keep providing knowledge to everybody and carrying everybody further amongst their crafts,
Yeah.
Yep. And
their paths.
then This Sunday, we have Tish Owen coming on the podcast, and she's a psychic medium out of Nashville
Mm-hmm.
and runs her own metaphysical shop. She's an accomplished author, and we get to pick her brain for a little bit.
All right, I'm excited. And then for you who are watching this potentially in the future, we're talking about November 10th. So wherever that kind of lands with whenever you view this. All right. Well, have a good night, everyone. I hope to see you next time. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything you'd like to throw out there, feel free to comment below and let us know your thoughts. And we will respond to you as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, share us out, send us to your witchy peeps.
Yep.
Help us find more people.
Absolutely. Well, have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Blessings.
Thank you, guys. Stay blessed.
Bye.